যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. Today, after a long time, we have back with us Madam Political Scientist, whom you can't see because I have, not knowingly, some settings in my StreamYard have been screwed up, because of which if a person does not turn on their camera, even their logo or DP won't be visible. So, Madam Political Scientist, thank you for coming back on our podcast after a long time.
Thank you so much.
So you proposed a very interesting topic today, that how a particular sociology department in China shook things up in 1924. What really happened back then?
Okay, so this was Shanghai University. I'm just going through some books on Shanghai and other cities just to understand them comparatively. And it turns out that in 1924, Shanghai University, the sociology department of Shanghai University, spread Marxist ideology as usual. And one of the teachers, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Qiubai, the Qiubai. So Qiubai, I think his name is. So he was one of the sociology teachers in the Shanghai University, and he married his student, Yang Zizhua, who combined Marxist classroom sociology with practical labor organizing. And there were part-time schools for workers, which were like a conduit for passing on Marxist ideology directly to the workers. So what you find in sociology departments now is just a propagation in India. I don't know about China, but in India, what you find is just a propagation of Marxist ideology to students who are vastly disconnected from real labor class people who are actually working in the factories. But back then in 1924, this was not the case. So students actually were involved in, and particularly we must note that this was a student who married her professor. So this was an influential student. So they were directly involved in passing on this ideology to the workers and enabling a sort of organization through the university. And this actually helped to spread the workers' movement, unionism, etc., to the rest of the labor community. But that doesn't mean that it was necessarily a good thing, of course, because I mean there are a lot of layers to this, because there were times when the workers' movement actually did not benefit the workers so much. There were times when there was, you know how there are political settings that happen even now, that has been happening since forever. So whereas the workers were instigated to protest, sometimes they were betrayed later on. So a lot of problems happened later. But the point is that the university sociology department was instrumental in propagating the workers' movement in 1924, which is interesting, considering that these days there is a disconnect we find between workers and university intellectuals who claim to be representing their interests.
What were the second order, third order consequences of that pricing?
Okay, so in order to understand that, we actually have to go into the history of this whole thing, the how business developed in Shanghai, and what were the who were the people involved, etc. So I'll just briefly go into that history. So Shanghai, as we all know, it was a city that was, of course, one of the biggest business centers in the world, and that has been Shanghai's legacy since the 1800s even till now. And despite being brutally exploited by political regimes, not just communist but also nationalist political regimes, it has managed to survive and stand on its feet again and again. So this is a very interesting, admirable thing about Shanghai. So uh, by nationalist, I mean the KMT regime, especially the KMT regime of Chiang Kai-shek, who were later defeated by the CCP and pushed into Taiwan. So the point is that Shanghai was always viewed as a sort of a foreign entity by Chinese people of other areas. Okay. And why was it viewed as a foreign entity? Because it had a lot of foreign influence, and Europeans played a big role in developing Shanghai, especially from the 1800s onwards, even beyond World War I. So, in fact, it had so much foreign influence that there were European concessions. These were called concessions. So, the European concessions were areas demarcated specifically for Europeans, like how we used to have the White Town in Calcutta, the Esplanade area, the Fort William area. So, similarly, there were such European concessions in Shanghai. Not just European, there were also Japanese concessions in Shanghai. So both of which were colonizing powers, very powerful business oriented cultures, and both of which actually contributed to building a lot of factories in Shanghai. So anyway, in these concessions, what happened is Europeans could run their own laws there. So these were like tiny, uh, one could say very tiny European colonies. So they did not take off the whole of China, but these concessions did not go by Chinese law. They had their own separate courts, they had their own separate municipalities, they had their own separate tax system, etc. Of course, there were many conflicts between the Europeans and the Chinese. You'll find many films, books on the literature on this as well, not just historical but also general literature. So anyway, these Europeans played a big role in setting this. Not just Europeans, Japanese foreigners in general played a big role in setting this up. But point is that many Chinese immigrants from rural areas or adjoining areas of Shanghai also benefited greatly from the setup that was made in Shanghai by both Chinese and European and Japanese and other powers, other business powers. So the reason why rural Chinese people think of Shanghai as too foreign, or at least used to, I don't know now, they used to think of Shanghai as too foreign, is because of these European influences. And naturally, when you have such a highly cosmopolitan city, it's bound to appear to be foreign. But a big question that I've been going through a number of books, and one of the questions one of the authors have raised is that it's foreign. What is it foreign to? Is it really foreign to China, or is it just foreign to the Babu class of bureaucracy? I'm using my own terminologies now. The bureaucracy and the political class who want to extort from Shanghai. Okay, so this was a very interesting question because, to be fair, the Chinese people of Shanghai were not at all anti-China. The Chinese people of Shanghai And I mean the ordinary business people, not necessarily connected to political or bureaucratic class. The business classes of Shanghai who were Chinese, of Chinese ethnicity, they were not anti-China, and they were not so steeped in their business mentality that they would betray China. If anything, the business class of Shanghai actually set the standard for Chinese nationalism. And they actually wanted China to take its own unique space in the global market and in global polity. So this business class of China had an enormous role to play, of Shanghai, the business class of Shanghai, which was greatly hated by uh, political powers as well as rural powers, actually played a big role in setting up setting up China as a major power bloc, even long before, not just now. So one difference I find between that and say a place like Kolkata is how and the Chinese nationalists in Shanghai, they demanded equality for China, and they also demanded cooperation with foreigners. So this was a very pragmatic orientation they had. They were not nationalist in the sense that they wanted to get rid of all foreigners, because they saw that the benefit of being connected to the market, to the global market. So um, the difference between that and what I find in the history of Kolkata, for instance, is that here in Kolkata we had political nationalists who were more interested in getting rid of the colonial powers rather than ensuring that India forms its own unique space in the global market. So the focus was more on change of political power, change of regime, rather than bringing about uh, economic development which can trickle down to the native population. Um, okay, I think there was something else I was talking about how Shanghai is branded as foreign. So and how it should not be branded as foreign. So the main reason being that they were nationalist. And okay, so your question was how did um,
What were the far-reaching consequences?
the far-reaching consequences of, yeah, 1 second. So for that, we have to again look at how Shanghai was developing. So there we find that Shanghai was primarily a city of immigrants, not just British, American, or Japanese or French immigrants, but also Chinese immigrants from adjoining areas. So among Chinese immigrants, there were three categories: the Cantonese, the Ningbo, and the Jiangsu people. There were North Chinese people also. So among these, the Cantonese and the Ningbo people were relatively more powerful. They had better connections, they had more money, and they could find a place for themselves in the Shanghai economy more easily. And on the other hand, the immigrants from North China were mostly very poor. They were either peasants who were displaced or something like that. They came to Shanghai and became beggars, things like that. So, or very unregulated laborers um, in the informal economy. So the what we need to look at is how the Canton used to be a hub of business, foreign business, even before Shanghai. And when Shanghai became the hub, then Cantonese workers, they shifted to Shanghai, and the Cantonese were immigrants. They formed their own guilds, and they were quite clannish. Actually, there was a caste system operating there. So caste system in the sense that they would mostly help out people from their own Cantonese community. And this led to a lot of native place associations between the immigrants from specific areas, and community activities and the feasts, these also helped. And what happened is in 1853 Shanghai faced something called the Small Sword Rebellion, which was actually led by the Cantonese secret society. And all of these secret societies were actually also engaged in opium trade, And in 1853 they seized Shanghai and they assassinated the magistrate. A lot of political problems happened, but the militia barely faced any opposition in its Shanghai coup, because the members of the militia rebelling against were also rebelling against the Qing dynasty, and they occupied old Shanghai and many of the surrounding villages. And the Chinese gentry and merchants, they took refuge in the British and French concessions. So this was the situation where you find that although there were Chinese nationalists among the Chinese business class in Shanghai, they were also on good terms with the British and the French business people. So whenever there was some kind of political uprising, they were able to find a place for themselves to keep themselves safe for the time being. But the point is that these a lot of these unionizations that happened later have a predecessor in in these kind of rebellions and coups that were formed by the guilds. So what you see as unionism today, you can find a predecessor of that in the guilds that existed in the 1800s. And that's the reason I thought of going back to the early immigrants who came to Shanghai, because when we talk about unions, it's also a good idea to talk about how the culture of unionism is not born in a vacuum. It has an ancestry in the guild system. But during the 1800s, this guild system was highly disorganized, and most of the so-called rebels and protesters were also linked to many violent crimes, and which is not very different from today. And they were also unemployed and disgruntled workers who spread their violence mainly to reign under the garb of an ideological protest that eventually took a political form. So on the other hand, CCP today, if you look at CCP today, it is way more organized compared to either the unionization of of 1920s or the guild system of the 1800s. And ultimately, what you notice is that a lot of the identity based violence that happens is not so much to do with liberating a community or demanding independence, but more to do with destabilizing an existing regime, not to bring something better in its place, but simply to capture the state power. This is what you keep realizing the more you read the history of protests and unionization and uh, any kind of rebellion that happens. Now, out of all this, unionization is a relatively more organized form of ensuring that what do we call that grab of power. But ultimately, it's not so much to do with the benefit of the workers, but more to do with how to extort power from the existing regime and destabilize it. And Mao ultimately finally managed to capture the power properly, but the spirit of disruption, the spirit of coup and grabbing power existed as early as the mid 1800s. And what Mao CCP did was just more successful version of what the small sword society had attempted in the 1800s. So there was not much methodological difference between the violence that was spread by criminals in the 1800s, disgruntled workers and criminals in the 1800s, and what Mao did in his time. Difference is that you had something like the sociology department supporting it. You had intellectuals guiding it uh, in a sophisticated way, but the ground reality was not too different. So all it did was spread a ton of disorder.
I see. So those were the second order, third order consequences. Disorder.
Yeah, but
Um, we have a interesting critique from a viewer here. He's saying
yeah.
European settler are better or are more important than Chinese locals because of business connections, because of quote unquote business connections. That narrative as to why Shanghai is more quote unquote developed feels very Eurocentric or colonial. Uh, do you agree with him?
Like I said, it wasn't only European settlers. There were Japanese settlers, there were Americans also, there were Chinese business people also. So Shanghai was a mix of many, many kinds of business elite. What I would rather say is not only European settlers, but rather the connection with the world market. That is what is more important. And by world market, I don't mean only Europe, but the presence of European settlers had both a negative and a positive effect. You can see the existence of concessions and their own unique spaces as a negative effect, because you can argue that they are sort of colonizing the land. But to be honest, they couldn't really get away with it, because Chinese people, top to bottom, are extremely nationalist. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. There was something called the May the 30th movement. I actually had to make a timeline of all the events that happened, because so many events happened there. So, in 1925, there were some workers who protested for, I think, wage increase or something in a English factory. As far as I remember, an English factory, British factory. So the 30th May movement was a movement that was organized by Chinese workers, because Shanghai police shot at them. They shot and killed, I think, 10 or 11 protesters who were demanding higher wages. And this led to an enormous, a sort of blanket movement across Chinese people against the British business owners. So much so that British, a sort of anti-foreign sentiment was cultivated not only in Shanghai but in other areas of China as well. So it's not like they were subservient to the British. It's not like they were subservient to the European colonizers. Rather, they could use the connections built through these internationally connected people to raise their own economic, to develop their own country. So, and 30th May movement is just one example. There are many others like this. So, the point is, there were many ups and downs in the relationships that the Chinese people had with the Europeans, Japanese, etc. Points of alliances, points of rebellion, points of conflict, and but ultimately it led to some churning in that area, in that city, which will be missing if you completely close off that society and focus only on a kind of uh, closed market sort of environment. So I'm not in support or against Europeans staying in Shanghai. I have no opinion on that. But the point is that a city connected to the world market is obviously going to fare better.
Yeah. Some of our viewers have joined a little late and are asking for a recap on why did we name our live stream today Sociology, a sociology department shook things up and not socialism. So could you please do a recap of how sociology, one particular sociology department led to this and not directly just socialism?
Socialism was also a part of it, but the Shanghai
Yeah.
University Sociology Department was instrumental in spreading Marxist ideology from the university circles to the workers directly. And that is how they spread socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it. To be honest, I don't like to differentiate between these words. I think they're just potato. But anyway, the thing is, what I found interesting is how even back then, sociology departments were these kind of incestuous spaces where teachers marrying their students, and the students are, the female student who married him. She was actually instrumental in instigating the female workers of various factories to start, uh, their own protests. So, yeah.
Okay.
And one more
Here's
thing I just
another.
wanted to point
Yeah, go
out
on.
that,
Yeah.
why it's interesting that we know of the history of the creation of Taiwan, where CCP pushed KMT people out and pushed them into Taiwan. But if you read the history of CCP and KMT, there were several points in history where CCP and KMT actually collaborated, but they came together and they were allies. For instance, there was a time when China was ruled by warlord factions. So these warlord factions were basically extremely violent feudal lord type characters who existed very well into the 1900s, and they would simply extort money from businessmen, kill people. So there was rampant violence, rampant extortion, and it just made no sense administratively or in any other way. And during that time, CCP, KMT, Green Gang, we've heard of the Green Gang, which was also a very violent gang in Shanghai, committing a lot of crimes. But during that time, CCP, KMT, Green Gang, they all came together to defeat the warlords. And um, Green Gang, in fact, was a gang that sometimes worked for CCP, sometimes worked for KMT. And another example of CCP, KMT unitedly working is the Shanghai University. And there are many examples where uh, unions were set up under government jurisdiction. So when KMT was in power, it would fund unions so that, maybe it was like controlled chaos, an attempt at controlled chaos or something, where they would fund the unions. But interestingly, although KMT was giving the money for the unions, CCP people who were much less powerful at that time would do all the cultural activities in the unions. So what happened was, and this is before Mao came to power. Okay, this is when CCP was still building itself. It was still going up and down, fluctuating in its power structure. So uh, KMT is giving money to fund everything in the union, food, water, all sorts of provisions. But CCP is hosting the cultural activities like reading club, like drama club, like songs. So the people who are a part of that union, the workers who are a part of that union, who do you think they will get more attached to? They don't remember who is paying for them, because they are getting wages either way. But they will not remember which organization is funding the food, because that is not going to be stamped. And even if it's stamped, who remembers that? But they are going to remember the songs that are being sung. They are going to remember the drama that they're watching, and the drama that is being played, being enacted there, is of course going to be communist in nature, because the CCP people are the ones hosting it. They are going to remember the reading club, and the books that are going to be read are going to be Marxist books. So this is a very interesting, I felt a very interesting combination, which ultimately benefited the communists. And we usually think of communists and nationalists in China as opposed, but interestingly enough, the barring, except of course the influence of the Soviet, even CCP in China was more nationalist than the communists in India can ever be. So, Chinese nationalist, of course. Then again, communists in India are also Chinese nationalists. So, maybe there is a commonality we can agree on. So, anyway, uh, what I want to emphasize is the influence of academia, the influence of cultural, activities, the influence of actors, the influence of literature on brainwashing people, on bringing people onto one's team. And unless there is a realization of this, we cannot hope to build a narrative that can work. Simply funding an organization doesn't work. You have to know who are the people running it. I mean, just compare with how America funded the Pakistan. But ultimately, what did it do? They just poured the money. But the ideology that was formed there was not the ideology that America espouses. So it was the ideology of the Mujahideen. So there is a there is a difference between who is funding and who is actually running the show. And in case of China, it was CCP who was running the show, even when it was not in power. I believe that even if we look around ourselves right now, we might find the same thing happening. Um, Even if a nationalist party is in power, the academia is still being run by communists who are, or whatever, leftist, liberal, whichever term you want to use for them. And unless there is a realization of the need to push nationalist people with the right set of language, the right linguistic power to capture these spaces, there will be no difference made ultimately.
Okay, we have a nice segue to get to, which was kind of what you touched upon already, but here's a follow-up extension. We'll just club together two questions. Okay, so Retrowave is asking, how did they do it, the brainwashing? And someone else is saying, academia needs to be limited to only research and scholarly discourse. They shouldn't be given this much subtle influence behind the scenes. My question is, firstly, do get to how did they do the brainwashing? But of course, the brainwashing happens because of the research and scholarly discourse. So how will we even draw the line that, okay, do scholarly discourse, do research, but don't do subtle influence? But it's the research and scholarly discourse which is doing the influence. How do we tackle this?
I agree with you. The research and scholarly discourse is the thing that is doing the subtle influence. And if we just, say that let's not do subtle influence, let's just do apolitical, neutral research and sit with our arms folded, we are just going to lose out because the other side is already doing subtle influence. There's nothing you can do to stop them. You can't, you cannot use physical force to stop them because they're already cushioned. So and besides, they're not doing anything illegal or wrong per se. They're already just building narrative. So if it's like wishing that rapists won't rape, right? It's like wishing that suddenly all rapists will become decent. No, it won't happen. So the only thing we can do is do subtle influence the way the other side is doing it. So I don't see why that should be a problem. And the previous question you asked was, how did they
Brainwashing.
do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the brainwashing was actually, there were times when, so the CCP branch in 1938, the CCP branch was established in the commercial press, which had very educated workers. So CCP would always do this. They would always target the more educated, more elite, literate people to do the work of brainwashing. They would also target the North China immigrants. They would also target the poorer people to be the listeners of those elites. So they had no qualms about this. They are the ones who talk about classless society, but they are the ones who take the most advantage of a class divided society. So they would go to white collar workers, they would have book drives, in-house journals, and these white collar workers really enjoyed these initiatives. Okay, because they had a disdain for yellow unionists. Yellow unionists were the government funded unionists, which were not real unions, which were just safety valves. So white collar workers and journalists, etc., they really appreciated CCP's work. So maybe one could say that a veneer of sophistication and cultured outlook helped CCP to, first of all, approach the kind of elite that they wanted, the educated elite that they wanted, gain their support, and also use them to influence the laborers. And we may think that the written word doesn't matter, just focus on neutral research, but this is the point, that the CCP will not focus just on neutral research. At least that was the way back then. And in 1939, for instance, the workers in the circulation department of the commercial press, they protested against inflation, but the Yellow Union didn't support them. And still they protested. When the schools were about to open a textbook when the schools were about to open and the textbook sales were high, they suddenly refused to work. So this was the way they protested. And After 14 days, the protesters won. The the yellow unionists were undermined, and this is how communist mobilization increased. So it happened in small phases. These were the small wins which gradually accumulated into a big win for CCP. Small wins in small departments, in small factories, labor unions, etc., where the CCP was slowly gaining ground, slowly winning. We have to remember that there was a time when CCP was actually the underdog. It was not in power. And when it was the underdog, it used both elite influences and gradual chipping away at the system to regain its influence. So I would say that is kind of, yeah, my answer to how they were able to do it. But CCP could not achieve this without the help of white collar workers, journalists, educators, professors, students, etc. CCP was supposed to be the party of the proletariat, right? They could have easily only focused on the North China immigrants who had nothing at all. The North China immigrants are, I told you about three Chinese immigrants, the Cantonese, the Ningbo, and the North Chinese. So the North Chinese were the poorest of them all. They were mainly, when they came to Shanghai, they were mainly either beggars or sex workers or things like that, or informal laborers. They had nothing. If the CCP would have wanted, being the party of the proletariat, they could have focused exclusively and only on these people. They did not. Let me also tell you one more thing. The Ningbo were like the most elite of the immigrants who came from other parts of China. And the Ningbos, when they protested versus when the North Chinese immigrants protested, there was a hell and heaven difference. The very appearance of a Ningbo protest was extremely elite, very sophisticated. So they would walk in a very dignified way. They would wear very crisp, good clothes. They would walk with posters which were well written, and there was rarely a time when they would be shot at or killed very easily by the police, and they would not make a big ruckus while doing their protests. Compare that with the North Chinese immigrant protests, who were very poor, who were uneducated and illiterate mostly, and who were barely making ends meet. When they were protesting, they basically depended on one or two leaders who were leading the protests, and one shot in the air and they would scatter. Okay, so they didn't even have the tenacity to hold on to their protests, even as they were marching on the road. There are incidents like this. So it's all documented, so I could send it to you later. So the point is that CCP, there's a reason why they did not go for only influencing the poorest of the poor. Rather, they went for the most elite available workers. And by workers, I don't mean laborers, but rather managers, etc., white collar workers, used them and then spread their propaganda because it simply works.
So you know that academic man is watching our podcast right now, and you probably know what both of us are thinking right now, right? That there's a clear analogy with Kolkata and CPIM here. That
Hmm.
the Kolkata Brahmin Vaidya class or caste will never be fucked with by CPIM. They will kill people in
Hmm.
Morichapi. They will kill lower caste Congress workers, but not
Hmm.
BBKs. So
Hmm.
we will get to that analogy, but first we must discuss this meritocracy that communists actually believe in, whether it was CCP
Yes.
or whether it's CPIM. Um,
Hmm.
we had a I had a political science teacher in my school who is today a self-declared Marxist. It's still written in his LinkedIn handle, and he is doing some. He has some research position, research grant in that organization, whose name I keep forgetting. It's a central government organization, CSSR, or Center for Social Science Research. That organization. Okay.
Hmm.
So I was once hanging out with him in Jadavpur University, and he was discussing political movements with a fellow commie, and he was saying that yes, I know it's all about the lower classes and stuff, but the lower class can't give arguments. He was saying middle class lower class to तत्व dite parbe na, to wo tatwa to nahi de payenge, so we need upper castes essentially. He did not go ahead and make that statement, but CPIM has always believed that. We see that in action. And I don't know if you saw this post of mine just about 1 hour back, that I just saw an article in a Bengali newspaper just yesterday only, that a lot of TMC people and TMCP people are begrudgingly discussing amongst themselves that IPAC is mostly overwhelmingly hiring only former SFI and left-wing organization students, and almost pretty much no TMCP students because of qualifications. They, all of those SFI folk are mainly Brahmins, Vaidyas, Kaistas, who have elite degrees from elite institutions in political science and social science. And when IPAC was asked about this, they said that we don't give a shit about ideology. We just want the best guy for the job. And one TMCP guy, in fact, said that he almost got hired by Nation with Namo, but then was rejected because they got wind of him being from TMCP. So there are so many hilarious angles to this. Firstly, that no TMCP guy is deemed qualified enough by IPAC. Then that IPAC actually believes in merit. Then the fact that Nation with Namo seemingly probably doesn't believe in merit, or and which is more sad, that they found someone to be qualified enough who is not qualified enough for IPAC. So so where do you think we should draw the line with merit? Should we draw a line with merit? Because let's say an SFI guy is actually hired by Nation with Namo. Okay. The SFI guy would probably not have a problem working for Nation with Namo if he's getting paid well and stuff. And he would not really say or want to do anything that would go completely out of line with Nation with Namo, because after all, you have to work in a hierarchy in an organization. So what do you think is the fear of organizations like Nation with Namo, or any right-wing organization who would focus on ideology and not qualifications? Or do you think people should focus on ideology, people who are creating these organizations and hiring these people?
I told you something a little while back, that is, Indian communists are basically Chinese nationalists, right? So that is the main reason, I think, why an organization where like Nation with Namo would fear someone with an SFI background, because for instance, in China, KMT CCP uniting is one thing, because both are nationalist, both are working for China in their own ways, granted with different ideologies. But in India, you have a whole category of people across classes, across caste, across classes, who are determined to see the downfall of this country. And so hiring without checking that ideological background might be a little risky for a nationalist organization. Now, the problem also being that the issue of merit, whether or not it's cultivated enough in the right ways, so among the right people. And so the I don't know if I have an answer to this really, because the only way out that I can find is if you can change the way schools and colleges are run, because the teachers teaching in these schools and colleges are already influenced with a certain ideology, and they are going to pass it on to the students. The only way in which you can expect a nationalist meritocracy in the future is if that influence is changed. So yeah.
A viewer of ours is asking, how has sociology helped China to establish a uniculture by erasing all the diversity? Has sociology contributed to that as well, the sociology departments of China?
Even if there is diversity, the subtle communist influences work nonetheless, even if there is diversity. So, for instance, when CCP was not even in power, they used to maintain a low profile. but they used to recruit through personal connections rather than organization. So they would, instead of strikes, they would do sabotage. So they would keep a low profile, but they would help, but they would make friends with people who are in the Shanghai Labor Union, things like that. So, and oftentimes they would even use the help of gangsters. So, like I said, the Green Gang, they would uh, often ally with CCP and sometimes also ally with KMT, depending on who was funding them at the time. I'll give you a small example. There was a person named Hu Yongki. Again, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly. He enabled communist inroads among Shanghai insurance workers. So he established the CCP-backed Insurance Federation. Insurance Federation was backed by CCP, which promoted culture, education, welfare among insurance employees. And the inaugural meeting of this federation was held in a Ningbo Native Place Association in 1938. And it also set up many cultural groups like club, journal, etc. Just like I gave you an example of a while ago. Their drama troupe was officially joined with CCP, and they even attracted many audiences. And these insurance workers readily accepted CCP because of the cultural influence that they were spreading. And because these insurance workers accepted CCP, later the white collar workers of other sectors were also more inclined to accept CCP. And by the late 1930s, workers would pass around handwritten copies of Mao's speech along with their own poems and cartoons and songs secretly among each other. So despite not being in power, can you imagine the amount of influence that they were already gathering among white collar workers, educated people? And there is this fun that one finds in secrecy and in being sort of anti-establishment, this that, and CCP at the time being the underdog was helpful at that in that way. So I would not say that CCP was trying to uh, impose a monoculture from the top. Rather, CCP was like a working in the capillaries, infiltrating wherever it could and whichever influential organization it could, not just the poor. In particular, they targeted the rich. The CCP also recruited factory artisans like mechanics and carpenters, and they when they were able to push their own workers into certain sectors as and when they gradually gained some more power. So um, the point is that rather than a unicultural diversity binary, they weren't thinking about all those things at the time. They weren't thinking about imposing monoculture at the time. They were mostly just thinking about how to make their own party the default. And once the party reaches the hearts of the people through these secret societies and dance, drama, song, whatever culture, and let's not forget, not just dance, drama, these people also hosted tea sort of chai pe adda, chai pe charcha type of things. So which were spaces where people could unwind. Okay, so these are, you work in a factory, you get funded by a businessman, all of that is fine, but the memories that you will retain, the emotions that you will form, will be based on these chai pe charcha, will be based on these feasts and banquets and other cultural activities that you are a part of. No matter how much you love money, you are still going to enjoy the company of people who give a positive vibe, right? So and imagine if those same people are also elite, sophisticated, dignified, having an aura about themselves, then all the more it's very, very easy to get influenced by them. So that was the strategy that they were using, and that was their main focus: influence and hegemony, rather than simply creating a monolithic environment is not possible to create, because everyone has their own unique native place connections to remember. So it's not possible to create a monolith. Even if we go to China today, we will not find a monolithic country, I'm sure. But point is that we will nonetheless find people who are supportive of this ideology, because this has been percolated in their capillaries. So once it goes that deep inside you, through your emotions, through your memories, it's difficult to get out of that.
Our viewer is asking or saying that Chairman Mao Zedong completely erased BBK of China or BBK like people of China. Do you agree with this statement?
Well, what Mao did, one could say that yes, he did remove a class of elite and established himself. But ultimately, well, it wasn't even sustainable. So, and what do you mean by BBKs of China? Because uh, there, even the BBKs are not the same as the BBKs here. There, even
In
BBKs
what
are
way?
pro-business. Even here,
Oh,
for instance, so
I
there even
see.
the elites are pro-business. The Ningbo people I just
Hmm.
told you about, who used to
Right,
hold their
right.
protests in a dignified way, they were extremely
Yeah.
pro-business. So there were Ningbo people who were workers. There were Ningbo people who were businessmen also.
Hmm.
And the Ningbos were in fact the most prosperous of the business people.
Hmm.
And they used to hold the most prosperous tea parties, not just tea parties. They used to have these bird feeding parties, things like that. So all kinds of exotic stuff, very elite exotic stuff that they would hold. So if we have to stop thinking of them as the same as the BBKs of Kolkata, because BBKs of Kolkata, they valorize a stupid kind of poverty where they will send their sons and daughters to the US to settle, but they will wear torn Punjabi or shadi in Calcutta and walk around like as if they own nothing. But or they will wear, very shabby clothes with a jhola, and they will act like as if they own nothing. But that was not the way that the elites of Shanghai, even the immigrant elites of Shanghai would behave. Chinese people. So they took a great deal of pride in their business, in their money, and they were not ashamed of it. And on top of that, they were nationalist. So they had no anti-China sentiment. They may have been anti-KMT, anti-CCP depending on the time. Even KMT, CCP were together and enemies depending on the time. But one common strand you'll find is that they don't hate their country. So that is a big difference between BBKs there and BBKs here. And
And that has to be one of the reasons for China's success, China's
yes, of
prosperity.
course, of course, of course. The elites, not all elites, of course. I am sure who all I, and your viewers also know who all I mean. There's a whole class of elites in our country who simply hate India, who want to watch it break, who have never read the Bhagavad Gita but want to dismantle Hinduism. How are we ever going to succeed as long as these people are still thriving? In China, no matter how much dispute there was among the people among themselves, the one common strand is they all were nationalist, and the kind of nationalists they were, I'll also tell you, they weren't always necessarily having to proclaim their nationalism. Like here, nationalism is such a rare thing, especially until a few years ago in Bengal, until a few decades ago rather in Bengal, it was such a rare thing that you had to wear it like a badge, and you had to prove that I'm nationalist, I'm Hindutvavadi, whatever. It had to be um, engraved in your personality.
Yeah, when the
But
central
then,
government declared that you'll have to stand up for the national anthem before every movie,
hmm,
people fucking lost their minds in Kolkata. I was one of
yeah.
them. But
So
anyway,
no, I to be honest, I always stand up for the national anthem, but I also found no real point in imposing it in movie halls, because we didn't always have it. We don't have it now. But does it really make a difference in our patriotic feeling? I mean,
it's just a
we
reminder, a bit of a nudge
it's a
that,
reminder.
hey,
Yeah.
remember India, remember loving India, that kind of a thing.
But I feel that if you must instill patriotic fervor in people, it should be done in a more deeper way than just pushing a national anthem during just before a movie. And I will still stand for it. Like I said, I will always stand for
Yeah.
my national anthem. Although in my
Hmm.
heart of hearts, my national anthem is the Vande Mataram, not the Janagana
Hmm.
Mana. But anyway,
Hmm.
um, and I will always stand for both. But
Hmm.
the point is, uh, people, I cannot expect all people to be like me. Not everyone is going to be a
Hmm.
patriot. And
Hmm.
I don't think patriotism can be instilled by simply playing the anthem before a movie. So
Hmm.
I think if you must instill
No, it was
patriotism, you
it
must.
was not it was not done to instill patriotism. It was done to mark the fuckers. That okay, let's see who has a problem with standing up.
Who has a
That
problem?
was the
Yeah,
goal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Now,
guess so.
when you say it must be deep, therefore it's a vertical
Hmm.
direction and it can't be horizontal. And unless it's horizontal, then a lot of people can't be brought
Horizontal.
along in the movement. Yeah.
What do you mean it must be deep? I mean, you mean how I said
You
the
said that.
nationalism
Yeah,
circulating?
you said that it must be deep.
Yeah,
It must be at a
yeah,
deeper level, the instilling of nationalism.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so if it is just deep and not this wholesale kind of a nationalism,
Huh.
then it will be stuck with only a few people, not the masses. The masses require non-deep things.
Uh, well, if you talk to enough people, I don't know who we categorize as masses, what income bracket, whatever, but uh,
Hmm.
across income brackets, um, if you uh, talk to enough people, you'll find that some degree of nationalism does exist among people in general. So
Yeah.
uh, it's a default. It's natural. In fact, it is so natural that when I used to discuss about how in my sociology department or whatever in a political science department, if there were people who were spreading any kind of anti-national propaganda, it would be difficult for other people to believe because they cannot even imagine anyone doing something like that in an academic environment. That is how default nationalism and patriotism is among people, because they would imagine why would anyone even do this. They can't imagine it unless they actually attend the classes and listen to the professors telling them that India was formed in 1947, there was no India before that. Unless they attend the classes and listen to professors saying that Kashmir was never a part of India. Okay, unless they attend classes and listen to professors who spread propaganda like what else? We know the whole range of it, right? So how uh, Naxalite areas deserve to be liberated, like as if that's even a real liberation. So unless people actually attend the classes and listen to this kind of anti-national propaganda, they find it difficult to believe that such propaganda even exists, because they it is difficult for them to imagine such degree of anti-nationalism. So I don't think that horizontal spread of nationalism is absent. It's probably already there, unrealized because it's default, unrecognized because it's so innate. Um, but I feel that maybe it requires a bit of more, nudging in order to come out when necessary. And of course, there are
Uh,
some categories of people who are not going to be a part of this, who are not at all nationalist and who truly do want to break this country. So that is a different issue. But there are people
yeah,
who
I was
don't.
about to come back to this only. Uh, you were talking about how some elites of the country actively don't want what's in the best interest of the country and want to see the country broken up, etc. Those elites, I just remembered that they swear by Ambedkar, of course, but they have not, of
Uh,
course, read Pakistan or Partition of India. But most of them have not even read Annihilation of Caste. They have just read the foreword to the Annihilation of Caste by Arundhati Roy.
uh,
That's the extent of
uh,
their Ambedkar fangirlism. Now, I want to bring your attention to another thing, because you were bringing up the fascinating point of how those, let's say, propaganda uh, ammunitions of the CCP were such fun gatherings. And I think nationalists and right wingers of all societies and countries have some enmity towards fun, because they
Yeah.
are understandably so obsessed with duty, and are so
Mhm.
opposed to hedonism to such an extent that anything fun seems like hedonism immediately to them. So we know
Mm.
what right wing retreats and equivalents of those things would sound like. You would have to listen to long history lessons, a bit of scripture reading. That would be the extent.
Mm.
But whereas leftist hangouts and propaganda hangouts would be fun and filled with hedonism, but if even if not hedonism, but at least fun. Do you think the right wing must also embrace fun, or we must not sacrifice our morals, and we must draw a red line and say that no, uh, if we give even that up, what are we even fighting for? Let's just be absolutely focused on anti-hedonism and duty, and let's have non-fun retreats and those chai pe charcha equivalents which are not fun. Which side do you fall on?
Uh, okay. I believe that right wing people don't need to be, you know, Catholic nuns. They don't need to be that. And as for you mentioned something, you mentioned that they just gather people and do scripture readings. To be honest, if they actually even read the scriptures themselves, then they would realize how much fun the scriptures also are. Okay, none of our scriptures are telling us not to have fun. I mean, I'm reading the I am rereading the Mahabharata, and I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita for the first time properly now. And after the first chapter, second chapter onwards in the Gita, it's all about a concept of time, a quantum concept of time. And it's extremely interesting. And I have not yet reached the parts about duty and all of that. But if these concepts can be spread to people, these are neither hedonistic concepts, nor are they moralistic concepts, nor are they telling you to keep quiet and pray all day, nor are they telling you to only be very serious and do your duty only. These are these are concepts that will open your mind in directions you can't even imagine. Okay, I'm talking about the Gita right now.
So you are
So
saying that they won't rename any and all fun as calm and therefore opposite.
right wingers, they might, I don't know. So I mean, look at what this who's that reviewer who reviewed Kantara so badly. I mean, recently came to know that he even said, "Ye pyar vyar kuch nahi hota hai. There's no such thing as love. There's only duty." You say stuff like that, you end up looking like basically a rejected nun. Okay, who became a nun because he was rejected, a monk because he was rejected. So uh, I think that there are people who want to impose a moral policy sort of behavior simply because they themselves didn't have fun in life or something. But of course, that is not the way to reach out to people. There is nothing anti-fun about Hinduism. There's also there's nothing pushing you towards hedonism either. But there is also nothing that is telling you that you have to stop laughing, you have to stop having fun. The, Hinduism is not teaching us all that nonsense. And in fact, the more I have studied about my own religion, the more I have been, you know, amazed at how much happiness it has given me. There's a difference between unrelenting um, and what do you call it, like unbridled uh, so-called hedonistic experiences versus happiness, right? Happiness and contentment. There's a difference between the two. So the more I have studied,
But
uh, yeah.
to be fair to that monk who scolds his Ferrari, there is a
Hmm.
difference between fun versus happiness and joy as well. Even the monk who scolds his Ferrari would say that yes, he is not opposed to happiness. He probably felt joy when his daughter was born, but that's not fun. Are you in favor of fun as well as joy, or are you okay with joy and not fun?
I'm in favor of fun as well as joy. Who has a problem with fun? There's nothing wrong with fun. But
Hmm.
what I feel is the leftists, what they do is, see, they'll call it fun, they'll do Faka flat in Lenin, okay? So
Yeah,
would you qualify that as fun? I mean, there comes a point of time where leftist fun goes to a point where Swapnadeep is thrown off the
yeah,
terrace and he dies.
yes,
So there
yes,
comes a point where leftist fun leads to, you know, I think I'm not allowed to use certain words, no? So graping of women, uh,
right, right,
yeah. So there comes a point
yeah,
where not women, men,
yeah,
transgenders,
yeah,
they're raped for
yeah, yeah,
in the name of fun, right? So
yeah,
you wanna, I mean,
yeah,
the thing with fun and hedonism is it is like a black hole. So there is no end to it. There's no filling it. There's no filling it. No matter how much you put in there, it's gonna get absorbed. You're gonna want more. There's no end to that. Okay. So you will never feel fulfilled. If a person has the mentality of a grapist, then there is no amount of fun that is going to be enough for him. Okay. He's gonna keep on at it. But yeah, I mean, fun up to a level is fine, but depends on how far you take it, right? So when it becomes uh, a deed that literally harms another living being, be it human, be it animal, anybody. So even animals, right? I mean, there comes a point where um fun means, beating up our dogs, things like that, because it's just fun. Why not? Or just harming someone physically weaker than you. So where do you draw the line with fun? There's no line for such people. And these communist hubs these faka flats are a hotbed of such kind of fun. Compared to that, person like me, I feel that fun in small doses in the right amount is fine. But I'll give you an example. It's good to have. It's good to have, say, something like an ice cream, right? Somebody who likes to have ice cream will like to have ice cream. Fine. How much ice cream is he gonna have? He has 2 cups. He has 3 cups. After 100 cups, he's gonna puke. He's gonna feel sick. So that's the way I feel about fun. That you have it in small doses. Why not? Or whatever, big doses also, if you can handle it, fine, why not? But you have it to a point where it fucks with your brain and it messes with your brain and it messes with your body. It will not help you or anybody. So that's the way I see hedonism. So I don't think right wingers need to promote hedonism, but I'm not a great political expert, because I'm sure there are people who are looking for hedonistic outlets. And if the right wing does promote hedonism, maybe it will survive, maybe it will thrive because of the excess number of people who are looking for hedonistic outlets. So as a political move, maybe hedonism will work. It's just personally for me, that's what I feel, that hedonism is just not meant for me. Fun for me is great, but I like to feel content. I like to feel fulfilled rather than
hmm.
constantly unfulfilled. Yeah. But I don't ask me for political.
Hmm.
I'm terrible. I'm very
Uh,
stupid when it comes to mass political strategies, because uh, I don't think like the way other people sometimes think. And I have often been scolded for
yeah,
this. I have been told that, why
hmm.
do you always think everyone will be like you? So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and most people probably are hedonistic. So if
hmm.
hedonism has to be made into a strategy to bring people in the team, maybe it'll work. Who knows? I don't know.
Hmm. I think the problem arises when you think of sattvic lifestyle as the only kind of lifestyle. There lies the main problem. Do you think
Hmm.
Ananda is an accurate translation of fun, or isn't Ananda supposed to be
Not at
bliss?
all. Not at all. I don't think Ananda is at all an accurate
Is there a translation of
translation of
fun
fun.
in Sanskrit?
I don't know Sanskrit that well. Uh,
Off the
in
top of your
Bengali,
head, can
the
you think
word
of any
is,
word?
uh, what about a Bengali word? Because Bengali is very close to Sanskrit. So,
Bengali to
uh,
Anando is fun.
Anando, I
Bengali
don't think
Anando is a little
Anando.
distorted. Moja.
Okay. Maja is not a
Moja
proper
and
Sanskrit word. I think it comes from
yeah.
the Persian or Arabic word,
Maza.
right?
Yes.
Maza.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. What
So,
about Khushi?
I
Khushi is joy.
joy, yeah, I guess. But
So no translation of fun in Sanskrit then. That's not a
I'm
good
sure there's
sign.
a translation for hedonism in Sanskrit, and that can be, uh, I don't know, that can be translated as fun as
Calm
well.
only. Calm, tamas
Hedonism,
maybe in some contexts. Tripti is
I'm not very
satisfaction.
sure. Hmm.
I can't
See,
think of
like I
a
say, hedonism also
yeah.
existed since the earliest of the human, since the human race existed, right? I mean,
Yeah,
even
of course.
even
Yeah,
in
of course.
the as far back as we can go, there was human cruelty and hedonism. In fact, if anything, right now it's probably a little less because everyone has to work now. But back when there was a class of people who could just not work and get away with being feudal lords, hedonism was much more. And prior to that, maybe hedonism was even more. So hedonism always existed. How much are we going to judge people for it? We have
Are
to
you saying
accept
our
that
Hindu
hedonism
kings were hedonists? Are you spreading Marxist propaganda and missionary propaganda?
why just Hindu kings? Why not every king who wasn't hedonist?
No,
So,
no. Everyone except Hindu
um,
kings must have been hedonist, according to the monk who scolds his Ferrari. Now, Navi
uh,
Vimarsh is saying, what is Natya Shastra if Hindu philosophy does not advocate pleasure? Ananda is the correct word, not fun. Not the fact is important, but you see, the problem with again right-wing gatherings equivalent to leftist propaganda gatherings would be that since Natya Shastra used to be fun thousands of years back, today they will hang out and discuss Natya Shastra, which is not going to be fun. It's going to be a, of course, very educative session. It's going to be a learning session, but it's not
uh,
going to be fun. That's
yeah.
always a common misconception with fun.
Sometimes right-wing
Um,
gatherings are also gender separated. Do you know this? That
in what way?
women and men sit separately, or sometimes, not
Oh,
always, but
hmm.
there are a few, you know, of these right-wing bolbo na, mane these Indian right wing, they're not really right wing. I don't know the right word for it. Indian nationalist
Non-left.
spaces, yeah, where these are gender. You sit in separate spaces sometimes, or sometimes
Hmm.
you don't sit in separate spaces. But suppose like you have a small the ye celebration, holy celebration. Suppose so, only the women will put color on the women, the men will put color on the men, like that. So
I see. I see.
I have seen such here. So it's like
Hmm.
as if if a woman puts a little bit of abir on a man, it's like as if they're gonna get married or something. So yeah.
Hmm.
So this
That I actually agree with. If today I
okay.
was organizing a right wing gathering, I would encourage if there's a stage and we are not just talking, we are going to watch something. I would separate the men and women because who knows who the fuck turns out to be a molester and does something and then the entire event gets
Yeah,
blamed. I was
yeah.
very shocked to see
True.
that in that Makaranchi Kranti, Makaranchi, what Arti in Goa, in that Malsa Narayani temple, the men and women were asked to separately sit. So that reminded me, yes, no one's going to take these risks. And even the holy example you are giving, who knows who's
Hmm.
secretly a spy for another party and then files molestation cases. Yeah, VXT, say yes to go low trust society. Yeah, but you see, Brahmin here is helping us out. Ardeshira Bandopadhyay has come up with the right words. Manoranjana, Krida, Harsha,
Oh,
Vinoda,
yeah.
Pramoda.
Hmm.
Yes. Um, Mayuresh is saying CSK has seen too much of people like John Peterson. He desperately needs content bleach. What made you say that? Say that. It's not really wrong, but what made you say it? Okay, I have a question for
Say
you
what?
from the audience. Sorry.
No, I missed what you just said just now. What made who say
Oh,
what?
that was a comment for me. Okay,
Okay.
another audience member is asking you that nationalism is generally opposed in favor of proletarian internationalism. How did China remain nationalist whilst becoming Marxist at the same time?
There is no such thing as proletarian internationalism. That's a myth that was propagated to instill Soviet agenda, or currently maybe Chinese agenda. I don't know. Wouldn't like to comment on the Chinese part, especially after the recent developments. But anyway, uh, this international proletarianism is just a myth that was created to push Soviet agenda during a time.
I
So
see.
I don't believe
Oh.
in international proletarianism to begin with. Where have you ever
No,
seen
no.
international
He's
proletarianism at
saying
work?
that the commies believe in it, and at the same
Hmm?
time in China they were nationalists. How did that work?
Hmm. So, uh, how did that work? There was some degree of Soviet influence in China. CCP was influenced by Soviet. Okay. Uh, and there were uh, changes made depending on what the Soviet at a certain point of time commanded. So, um, including, if I don't remember, if I'm not wrong, there was a time where I think Soviet and KMT came into an understanding, and CCP had to step down momentarily, temporarily. Step down not from power, they were already not in power. KMT was in power, Soviet had an understanding with KMT, and accordingly CCP was bypassed. So ऐसा भी हुआ है in the history of China. So uh, point is, if you first of all consider that international proletarianism itself is just a political myth, then everything else will become much easier for you. Because if it is a myth anyway, then it is just a tool that is being pushed to achieve some immediate political ends. And the reason why China remained nationalist is probably because of the culture of China. Probably because there weren't, I guess China wasn't colonized twice the way India was. I guess China doesn't have people who are loyal to another country the way some Indian citizens are. I guess China doesn't have, didn't go through the partition the way India did. So Chinese nationalism is natural, more natural. It just simply doesn't have that many number of uh, traitors in their midst. So the Chinese nationalism is more of a cultural affair, I would say, because of their history. This does not mean that there was no conflict in China. There were
Hmm.
endless conflicts in China.
Of course, of course.
First, Sun Yat-sen, he defeated the Qing dynasty, and after that, from the KMT, CCP had so many conflicts. Then KMT was pushed out, CCP came to power. They strategically allied, strategically conflicted, and like I said, there was a point of time even Soviet allied came into an understanding with KMT and pushed CCP slightly lower. So all kinds of settings, yeah, all kinds of understandings, dealings happened. But despite so many conflicts, and not just big level conflicts, there were conflicts, ethnic conflicts also in China. So I told you about the Cantonese and the Ningbo, the two categories of immigrants who came to Shanghai. So there were times when Cantonese laborers and Ningbo laborers would get into fights. Okay, over something, some issue. Some manager said something to somebody, they reacted, a fight started. So छोटे छोटे बात पे people fought, from top bureaucrats and politicians to bottom level whatever laborers, everybody. So there were conflicts, there were endless conflicts. But were any of these conflicts directed against China? These were all conflicts among people inside China. Whereas, and that is why Chinese nationalism is natural. Whereas in India, the conflicts don't remain personal or political or even partisan. The conflicts become a conflict between two different nationalist ideologies. There are people in India who literally support Pakistan. So then it's not just a conflict of person to person, or a conflict of ethnicity. It's not even just an ethnic conflict. It's not even just a political conflict. It's a fight for survival. So then that is why, here nationalism is more complicated. Their nationalism is more default and natural, and because the number of people there living there, most of them subscribe to a nationalist ideology. And as for why uh, international proletarianism isn't is how it is going hand in hand with that kind of nationalism, I don't think that the laborers there are thinking about international proletarianism to begin with. The people who may be thinking about it might be the intellectuals, the white collar workers, who might be thinking about an international proletarianism. But even they, when it comes to practical life applications, they're very pragmatic. They will do what is necessary for the time being to get what they need, be it higher wages, be it a protest, be it to achieve some kind of policy level change. Okay, so they will do what is necessary for pragmatic reasons. They will not do it to establish international proletarianism, even if they believe in it. So uh, I don't know if that answers the question. I hope it does.
It does. It does. I don't think there's any white collar worker in the history of mankind anywhere on earth who believes in internationalism. They will be the last ones to accept internationalism. This is a good
And the
question.
and
What
the
about
blue collar workers
Confucianism? Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, go ahead.
blue collar
Go
workers
ahead. Go ahead.
anyway don't give up. I'm saying the blue collar workers,
Hmm.
they anyway are not caring about this international proletarianism all that much.
Sorry, I
What they
meant
need
blue
is the
collars.
wages.
I did not mean white collars. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And as for even the white collar workers, I mean, people have their immediate pragmatic needs to look after.
Yeah. Yeah.
Only an extremely, um, closed and extremely cushioned person, like these, how you find the kind of people that Charlie Kirk used to debate, who have these set ideas about international proletarianism and the workers of the world unite and women of the world unite. Women of the same household can't unite. How are women of the world going to unite? So those kind of people who have these set ideas about international unity, I think only those are the people who can imagine international proletarianism. They are like what Lenin used to call useful idiots, maybe. But real people, white collar or blue collar, I don't think
Hmm.
they have time to actually implement international proletarianism in their work.
I agree. I agree. What about Confucianism's role in Chinese nationalism?
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm unable to answer that because
Okay.
my work has mostly been about the economic history. My study has been about the economic history of China.
I see.
So
Yeah.
so far I have not gone into that area, but I would love to.
Hmm.
Thank you for suggesting that. Actually,
Right.
I would love to explore that as well.
Another question for her from the same person: is modern China just Han supremacy over other ethnicities? Is the concept of China has it always been that? Does India have an equivalent? For example, Pakistan is Punjabi supremacy. What do you think?
Mhm. Again, this is one question I'm unable to answer, whether there is Han supremacy now, because as you must have understood by now, my study so far has been about the history,
Hmm.
not the current situation.
Hmm.
So I actually
Hmm.
must
I
study
see.
more about the current situation before answering this.
Hmm.
And uh, maybe once I do that, I may be more acquainted with this
Yeah.
topics.
Do you see any
And
similarities
also
between
my
China and
study,
Israel?
uh, well, I do see that they are culturally both deeply nationalist. That's one similarity I find.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
both communities are positively oriented towards money and business. Both communities
Hmm.
understand the importance of power. Both communities understand the importance of brute force, nationalism, and the importance of standing by their own country. rather than
Hmm.
betraying them. And
Hmm.
in both communities, I think there are various classes. Like they're see, every Jewish person is not rich, every Chinese person is not rich, but
Hmm.
in both Jewish and Chinese communities, I think there is a vertical link among the rich and the poor and the middle classes. So they're not
Hmm.
scattered. So, for instance,
I see.
I mean, if a Bengali person, I go somewhere, I'm not a part of any community, but I think that when
Hmm.
it comes to Jewish people or Chinese Israeli Jewish people or Chinese people, they're always connected, deeply connected with their community, which might also explain their deep nationalist feeling for the country. So even if they're poor, they will know other people in their community. They're not alone. You get what I mean? Oftentimes, Indian people or especially Bengali people in some cases are often alone. There's a lack of community holding them together. Or personally, the community that Bengali people have formed, sometimes it just tires me out. So uh, I don't know which is worse. But with Chinese or Israeli Jewish people, I guess the community feeling is much stronger. So yeah.
Navavimarsh is saying that College Street Kolkata might take support fees, sir. Unionize, fuckers. You are not unionized. I won't give a shit about you. I'm an evil capitalist. AK Brahma is asking to you, Madam Political Scientist, was Mao a great military commander or a great leader? Your thoughts?
Um, Regarding his military conquests, I have studied very less, but I have studied more of his economic policy. Let me tell you a few things that I remember. I have, actually, so many books I've gone through, so it's kind of jumbled in my head right now. But I'm trying to take out a few strands. Um, Mao initially uh, thought of imposing certain state level restrictions on Shanghai. For example, he made something called the three antis and the five antis movement. Okay, the three antis and the five antis campaigns. So these were supposed to be ways in which, one second. Yeah, so these were supposed to be state led, uh, you know, constraints on certain businesses. Okay, so the initial intention was basically economic, and they wanted the uh, one second. Yeah, so the three antis movement and the five antis movement, these were basically crackdowns by the state on businessmen, on profits, on prosperity. Okay, so they would lead to a lot of executions and suicides, and they were basically ways for the state to crack down on people who were doing well in business. Mao did this. Okay, but and he did this in the years. I'll tell you the years also. I just made a timeline here. Yeah, in 1951 and 52. Okay, he did these movements. So on the face of it, he made it look like the state is intervening in businesses to reduce bourgeois corruption. This was his official heading. But in reality, all it did was completely extort from these businesses, or sometimes even force the business owners to commit suicide, and completely ruin their chances. After all that, he realized that he has made too many blunders. He realized that he has put too many impositions on Shanghai. He realized that he has extorted way too much from Shanghai, and now there's nothing left to extort anymore. So then what he did was he decided to let go of some of these restrictions. He decided to extort a little less. There was even a point of time when Mao said that he will allow privatization, he will allow greater privatization, because first the private sector needs to develop, and only then can he extort from it. So, I mean, he was quite open about these things. Now, after that, I cannot call him a great leader, because a great leader wouldn't it depends on how you qualify great leader. Technically, he was able to retain power by doing all these forceful things. Okay, if that is your definition of a great leader, sure, he was. But by doing these forceful things, he absolutely ruined the economy of Shanghai through these 3 antis and 5 antis campaigns, through his first 5-year plan. All his 5-year plans were basically a way to extort more and more from the businesses. And after he realized that he has extorted too much and he's gone too far, then he said, okay, fine, let them build their private businesses again. After that, I can think about extorting again. So it was a total blunder. So I don't believe he was a great leader at all. And he put enormously heavy restrictions on the Shanghai economy. Another thing he did was, in the name of socialism, in the name of nationalism, which is something even Nehru did here, similar to what Nehru did here, was the freight equalization policy. So he would, during the Maoist era, professionals in Shanghai who were highly qualified would be forced to live outside Shanghai, forced to go to rural areas and do the same kind of work there without the adequate infrastructure, without the adequate payment, without the adequate facilities in other ways, whatever other facilities a human being needs, be it for family, be it for their own selves. So he would force professionals out of Shanghai and into rural areas. He would force not just professionals, but even provisions, goods and provisions, commodities out of Shanghai into rural areas. And not just rural, whatever, surrounding areas, without the sufficient equipment to help them sustain themselves. And ultimately, there came a point of time when people wouldn't go to these areas because Shanghai was simply more highly paying, more prosperous, and gave them greater scope for earning money. So people didn't want to go to these areas. They would come back to Shanghai somehow or another. But in the name of so-called national development, he completely dismantled the naturally thriving economy of Shanghai. And after all his great blunders, whatever little recovery Shanghai made was completely on its own. It was not with state support. The state only and only extorted from it. Of course, Mao alone didn't. Even when KMT was in power, KMT also extorted from Shanghai. But Mao's extortion was more systematic, one could say, more through policy, systematic, and administration. So, but yeah, terrible leader, not at all a great leader, in my opinion.
Okay, I was about to ask a similar question that Rishabh is asking on the screen, but he has asked it anyway. I was about to ask, let me first tell you that I had been seeing many retired generals come to Jaipur dialogues and say that, oh, any day now, any day China is going to dismantle. The day is near. Any day, every other week, they would do a podcast and say, okay, by the next month, by next 6 months, in the next 1 year, China is going to be destroyed. All of their rivers have dried up. Their economy is destroyed. All their houses will fall down. So Rishabh is asking, during your study, did you see any evidence for the claim that the Chinese economy is greatly exaggerated?
In the historical study I've done so far, no, not. Yeah, well, when Mao was in power, he personally, his party personally exaggerated, but that was more of an exaggeration of his great policy measures. As for economy, no, I did not come across so far any exaggeration of the economic progress of Shanghai or China. I'm mostly focused on Shanghai. I'm not focused on the whole of China. I am only focusing on Shanghai. So there, the whatever I've read so far has included fluctuations, has included downfalls, has included political conflicts, which has led to instability. So and it has also included recovery from all these damages. So and eventual thriving progress all over again. So I don't think I have come across exaggerations on economic development in the history of Shanghai. The question this person asked is more, I think, about the current situation, right? The river drying up and all of that.
Yeah.
So I can't comment on the ecological aspect of it. but I can give you a small idea of the labor oriented aspect of it. So we all know that in China, most of manufacturing is done in China, right? Most of the large scale manufacturing is done in China. The machine made manufacturing is mostly done from China, and India may be more ahead in terms of handicrafts and things like that. But anyway, let me give you a small comparison. Suppose India gets an order to produce, and we also know that in China wages are low, right? Compared to India, wages are low in China. This is something we hear from many places. Now, given these two pieces of information, something I've come to know, not from a book or anything, but through a little bit of field work, is that in India, suppose there is an order to produce 10,000 pairs of shoes from two companies. Okay, but in China, China will get the same order, but from 10 companies. These companies are foreign companies. Okay, in India, very few foreign companies are coming to place the orders, but in China, more companies are coming to place the orders. Why? Because in China, wages are low, so they have to pay a lower amount to get the same product. So India, for instance, may quote a price of 50 rupees per laborer daily. China, on the other hand, I'm just giving a gross example. China, on the other hand, will give a quote of 20 rupees per laborer daily. So if you're getting the same thing made in China, per laborer, you're saving 30 rupees. So naturally, more and more companies will be going to a place where they will be saving more money on the wages that they will have to pay eventually. So plus China
Yeah.
has superior machinery. But interestingly enough, despite getting less wages, the Chinese laborer makes more money. This is the tricky part. This is the trick. So the suppose in one country, each laborer earns 50 rupees per day, but they are earning 50 rupees per day from two companies, because not many companies are coming to that country to give their orders, right? On the other hand, in China, each laborer is earning 20 rupees per day, which is a low wage, but from 10 companies. So if you're earning 20 rupees from 10 companies, you multiply that, you earn 2000 a day. You earn 50 rupees from two companies, you multiply that, you're earning 100 rupees a day. So this is how, despite having low wages, they are able to low wages per company, per investor. Okay, each investor coming from outside is having to pay a low wage in China, therefore they're getting their products at a lower price from China. But eventually, since very many investors are coming in there to get cheap products, so ultimately the cumulated amount of money being earned by the wage laborer is increasing. So lower wages per investor is actually leading to higher wages ultimately. So this is the kind of trick that they have. It's not. I mean, I think it's a great strategy. I admired that, to be honest. So here you
This,
have people leftists,
yeah, go
and
on.
funny thing. Here in India, you have these leftists who actually are, pro China leftists, who will demand minimum wage, right? I believe minimum wage is going to be a terrible idea, because minimum wage is only going to ensure that more and more companies go to a different country like China, where wages are low. So on the one hand, these in China, they are keeping wages low and ensuring greater wages at the end of the day. But in our country, the same people who support CCP, who support communism, who support all of that, are demanding minimum wage, which is going to be disastrous for the laborers of our country. On the other hand, if wages are allowed to be low, and if investors are if you are able to pull in more and more investors based on that low wage, just wages low is not going to work. Alongside low wages, you need good factories, you need superior machinery, you need faster production, you need more efficiency, you need a better work ethic, etc. So if you're able to ensure all of that along with low wages, and pull in more and more investors, that is actually going to help our country much more, help the poor people of our country much more than just raising wages.
This
So
this reminds me of Yogendra Yadav ji, and also reminds me of how people make more money at Elon Musk's companies even though they don't have a union, because they directly get paid. But in other companies where they do have unions, you have to pay half your salary to the unions. Therefore, you go home with lesser money because the union has its own infrastructure and its own laws.
exactly.
Ardeshira Bandyopadhyay is saying
Yes.
comparison of corruption between KMT and CCP. What made the scales tip towards CCP pre 1949?
Corruption was there in both. Extortion, I mean, what do you define as black money and all that? I mean, uh, state extortion was there in both.
Bribery, black money.
Yeah,
Okay.
so KMT was more inclined to all of that bribery, black money when it was in power. And CCP, like I told you, they infiltrated into the capillaries, into the hearts of people through both the elites and the poorer the masses. So but after CCP comes to power, the corruption within CCP was no less. So I don't know which is worse, but I would say both are similar when it comes to the corrupt practices, to the extent of extortion and using gangsters to achieve their ends, using
Hmm.
violence, things like that.
Oh
Both
yeah.
of them did the same thing.
And also the
So
things you said that Mao did are so similar to what Nehru and PC Molanovich did to India and
mhm.
Bengal specifically.
Yeah, flight equalization.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Oh, another fun thing I came
Yeah.
to know today. Fun, but a very sad thing I came to know today. So, flight equalization was something that apparently CPM used to criticize when it first came to power, because it could use that to blame the central government for the poverty in Calcutta. So they would say that, of course, flight equalization was a big reason for depriving West Bengal, but it wasn't the only reason that West Bengal declined. So the trade unionism, the labor unionism, the terrible criminal environment that was created by the communists here were also big reasons for the decline of West Bengal, because investors refused to come here, seeing the extremely volatile political culture of the state. So when you don't have investors, you don't have prosperity. So CPM would whitewash all of that, but focus on fright equalization as the main villain. But fright equalization was actually dismantled in 1993 or 1994, and it was dismantled by economic liberalization, by the liberalization of our economy in 1990. And that economic liberalization is the same thing that CPM also campaigned against. So I wish they'd just make up their mind, because they have a problem with fright equalization. They have a problem with the very process that is dismantling fright equalization. They have a problem with everything. So, but ultimately, I think they
Yeah.
realized that this will not keep working. So they will have to get more investors, and they tried to. Oh, and the way the CPM tried to get investors, I guess you've heard of the Operation Sunshine. Have you heard of it? Jyoti Basu tried to implement it. I think in the 90s, or yeah, probably in the 90s, 80s or 90s, he tried to implement Operation Sunshine. So Operation Sunshine was basically a process by which the municipality in Kolkata, uh, wiped out around 1 lakh, wiped out as in evicted around 1 lakh hawkers, street vendors. Okay. The idea was that they will evict 1 lakh street vendors to make the city a neat and clean place, seeing which investors will come running to the city. Political culture को ठीक नहीं किया, हाँ, unionism को ठीक नहीं किया, खुद को ठीक नहीं किया, but victimize the hawkers so that you can project an image of a very neat and clean city and expect investors to come. Not just that, uh, before Operation Sunshine, they had even tried to ban rickshaws. They had tried to ban rickshaws and people who deal in rickshaws, not just rickshaw wallahs, but also people who trade in rickshaw. Okay. So they tried to ban rickshaws. And again, after Operation Sunshine, they also again tried to ban rickshaws. Again, for the same logic. They thought that if they wipe out poor people from the face of Calcutta, suddenly Calcutta will become very investor friendly. And this is CPM doing this. And then the rickshawalas, they formed their own some I'll let you know the name. I'm forgetting, some rickshawala panchayat, something like that. They formed with the help of the opposition party, with the help of some of the other leftist unions and maybe some NGOs, and they gher out the KMC, they gher out the politicians' offices or something, and then they managed to get their rights back. But this is the true face of communists in West Bengal. BBKs ensuring
Yeah.
investor-friendly Calcutta, not by creating a positive, conducive environment, but by simply wiping out poor people. Again, they tried to attack 1 lakh rickshawalas and just ban them. They tried to ban rickshawalas. They tried to ban hawkers. I mean, I don't know people's opinions on hawkers or whatever. They might be annoying on the pavement, whatever. Whatever said and done. The point is, removing hawkers and removing rickshawalas isn't just going to magically bring investors in the state. In fact, it did not. Even after they did all this, first of all, they did not succeed. Hawkers came back within a few weeks and started setting up their shop again. Rickshawalas won their battle and they continued their work. So it didn't work because just it's like putting it's like you're not fixing the problem inside your body. You're just putting makeup on your face. This isn't going to work. But the worst part is that these are the people who claim to represent the poor. These are the people who claim to be the poor people's party. But what was Operation Sunshine? It was basically anti-poor. It wasn't anti-poverty. It was anti-poor. If you want prosperity, then first fix the political environment. Absolutely get rid of your unionism. Get investors by promising them, zero unionism and all of that. And once you get investors, rickshawalas will also profit from there. Hawkers will also profit from there. Because when the Shingur factory was happening, at that time rickshaw rates had increased in Shingur, house rent had increased in Shingur, land prices had increased in Shingur. So local people who were otherwise poor were becoming prosperous, not because the government was giving them bhata or welfare, but because a factory was being set up there and there was an influx of population with money. So all you really need is a conducive environment where the teeth of the state are kept away and you just allow businesses to grow. Were there no rickshaws in Shanghai or what? Were there no hawkers in Shanghai? So did the rickshaws and the hawkers pose an impediment to development there? No. They prospered along with the rest of Shanghai. So if anything, immigrants, some of the poor are North China immigrants, they would come there, become rickshaw pullers there, become boatmen there, things like that. So yeah, reason why I brought this up is just I just remembered this while discussing, because I just recently started studying also about the history of Kolkata, and this came up, the Operation Sunshine.
Every anti-poverty law or policy is directly anti-poor, ironically. And Slevin is saying that hawkers on pavements are a bane. We have Indian habit of walking on road even when there is a pavement, just because of this. Yes, and it will always come
Sure,
back
I
because
agree.
the police will get a bit of a bribe, and they will let hawkers be there. The local parties gundas and the police will take a bit of a cut money and they will let that go on. And this is my biggest disagreement with people who say that, oh, the way to solve India's policing problem is just to increase the numbers of policemen. No,
What?
we have to alter the behavior of policemen, and that cannot be magically changed just by increasing the numbers. You have 20 corrupt police officers today, you will have 40 corrupt police officers. That won't solve anything. And people say, what about body cameras? I have repeatedly said that they will simply switch it off on the when a fuck up is happening, when the Titanic is sinking, they will switch it
Yeah.
off, and you will never be able to
Yeah.
prove it. By the time you prove it in court that no, it was switched off, etc., probably you will die, or your grandson will be fighting the case and stuff. And I can prove that because recently it has come out, and which has gotten almost zero coverage in mainstream media, that during the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, about 4,500 to 5,000 CCTV cameras were simply switched off in polling booths in West Bengal. That's one of the reasons why the exit polls did not match up to what exactly happened. Okay. Orchishman Dey is saying, how much role did people like Zhou Enlai and Deng Xiaoping play in the revolution? Do people like Zhou Enlai, were they more responsible for CCP to get power than Mao?
Deng, I have studied a little bit about Deng. So Deng actually undid much of the damage that was done by Mao. So he opened up. So Mao's idea was more like extortionist, and Deng's idea was more like allowing greater development to progress on its own naturally. 1 second. So yeah, so and then after Deng, also there was, I think, Jiang Zemin, who was, I think, the mayor of Shanghai at one point. And Jiang Zemin made it, in the 1950s, there was the automobile sector in Shanghai. It was based on a local system. And in the mid 1980s, it developed into a joint venture. And in the 1950s, many small factories were merged to manufacture and reverse engineer Mercedes sedans. So Jiang Zemin made it into a joint venture with Volkswagen, and since Chinese factories weren't good enough, most parts had to be imported from Germany, and Chinese factories refused to invest in improvements. So, but the point is that this kind of a setup where you contract with foreign companies and build your own machineries, these were all done by the people who were influenced by Deng, like Jiang Zemin. And Jiang Zemin also successfully curbed labor shortage in Shanghai. And because, he was instrumental in bringing in, ensuring that the labor is not constantly striking, and, they're made to be more involved in work. So the policies of Deng were more of a undoing of the problems that Mao had created, one could say.
Okay, Madam Political Scientist. Thanks a lot for staying on for such a long time. I know you need to get off the camera right now, and we'll do this pretty soon, hopefully. Thank you for taking so many questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining the live stream. See you soon. Good night.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো